table. We have a microphone up here, so I will ask one person from each table to come up. We'll have 2 minutes. We'll also have a little time, about 2 minutes to speak about what you found at your table. So I'm going to start with this table over here, and we'll do a chickie down the hall. So, all right, pick one spot. Person number one. I went around to all the tables, and there was a lot of different discussions. It was interesting to hear too the different ideas people had. Would you like to just come here so you have a microphone so everyone can hear you? Sure, yeah. It's a little tangled, so.
Hi, my name is Atia. I had the honor of being a part of the Canadian Youth Delegation to COP21 this December, so I was there in Paris when the historical agreement was created. And for me, it was really powerful to see the small island nations that were there and the climate vulnerable countries who were saying that we need to stay below 1.5 if we have even a chance of surviving. And that's really what we need to be fighting for. We need to be respecting climate science and the voices of impacted communities, because they're telling us that we know what the limit is and we need to meet it. And in order to get there, we need to be aiming for 100% renewable energy by 2050. And that's really what my group touched on. We talked about displacing carbon-intensive infrastructure and creating systems like microtransit systems and clean energy grids, which these transit systems would be dependent on. We also talked about justice and how we need to have a socially just movement if we're going to solve the climate crisis, which means we need to respect Indigenous rights and implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which means respecting free, prior, and informed consent and the right for communities to say no to projects on their lands that they don't want. A just transition also means justice. It also means justice for workers and supporting oil and gas workers with the transition to green energy. Initiatives like the Iron and Earth Initiative in Alberta, they've been asking the federal government for money, and we need to support them. We need to end the influence of industries like the fossil fuel industry. And in particular, subsidize innovation for green energy and technology. There also needs to be an accountability process for the companies that we are subsidizing, so we know which industries we're propping up, and the industries that we are propping up need to meet that goal of 100% renewable energy by 2050. We also talked about supporting, in order to get to the renewable energy goals, supporting provincial governments with programs like the community feed-in tariff, the micro feed-in tariff, incentives that are supporting community-based local renewable energy that is really showing benefits for communities themselves, and also supporting Indigenous-led community energy projects like run-of-river projects. Creating a green economy also means supporting retrofits and providing government support for retrofits. And I think that federal governments can lead the way by beginning by transitioning their buildings to 100% renewable energy, and then getting the rest of Canada there as well.
Thank you. And it's interesting that you raised, one of the interesting things that Minister McKenna raised is that they have charging stations at the Ministry of Climate and Climate Change and Environment. There aren't charging stations in all of our parking lots in government, and so there are things that we're trying to do. Personally, this is on a small scale. I'm trying to increase bike infrastructure on Parliament Hill. So there are a lot of ways that we can lead by example, and on a larger scale with retrofits, create the industry as well, the industry support for those types of things. So thank you. Why don't we go to table number 2? I'll go this way.
Spoke to a lot of our points.
No, Marty's microphone says at the back in here. Sorry, just and no, I just want to make sure that everyone gets a chance.
Okay, so we talked about a lot of stuff, so I'm just going to talk about it.
There's a lot of notes.
Yeah, exactly. So I think a lot of our points were covered by the previous speaker. I mean, we're, in terms of experiences, we're noticing winters and summers are warmer, and seeing the effects of drought on vegetation and water quality. We feel that the sun is actually stronger in terms of UV rays. We're having more intense rainfall. And the price and availability of food has been affected. In terms of solutions to GHG emissions, First up, we're saying leave the fossil fuels in the ground. Stop subsidies for oil and gas. Begin by putting a moratorium on any new oil and gas exploration in Canada. And subsidize training for oil and gas workers to transition to green energy jobs. And there was a point brought up related to that moratorium on any new oil and gas exploration in Canada. And maybe take some of the fossil fuel subsidies and subsidize training for oil and gas workers to transition to green energy jobs. A point one of our group made on that was that $1 million in the fossil fuel energy generates 2 jobs, whereas $1 million in the green energy sector generates 16 jobs.
Yes.
$1 million in the fossil fuel industry generates 2 jobs, and the same amount in the green energy sector generates 16 jobs. So we also talked about opportunities and support for community power, and we talked about the importance of the connection with publicly funded election campaigns, because having oil and gas being such a big lobby in Ottawa, it's hard to get around their influence, I guess. And using regulations such as the EPA's Clean Water Act in the United States that regulated that a certain level of water quality in municipalities and states that caused them to bring their cities to a higher standard of environmental action, and made their cities greener through green infrastructure in order to meet those water quality standards. So actually set regulations and standards that require compliance rather than more sort of guidelines and suggestions. Nuclear is not a solution. Geoengineering is not the solution. And geoengineering, like throwing cloud bombs in the sky to block the sun from heating us up too much. Encourage the use of microgrids and household generated power to reduce hexafluorocarbons involved in energy transmission. It's actually one of the longest living greenhouse gases, and it's involved in all energy transportation. So even when they say that hydroenergy is clean, because it has to travel long distances, it needs that certain gas to help it travel. And so the distance that energy has to travel is an issue. And supporting, in terms of question 5, supporting effective Indigenous communities, we also asked for UNDRIP to be ratified and integrated into Canadian law, and to maintain the Indigenous veto power on that, and to integrate Indigenous traditional knowledge and wisdom into climate change solutions, and to support Romeo Saganash's bill to integrate UNDRIP into Canadian law, specifically, and to ensure the most vulnerable communities in Canada and the world are helped with the impacts of climate change, and to recognize that transitioning northern communities to clean energy requires a holistic and socially minded approach.
I will let you know. Washrooms are down the hallway over that way, if anybody was wondering, and there are some snacks over there.
I'll be pretty brief. We sort of started with what is our experiences. Kind of, Judy had said, cut the bullshit, because we know what is happening, kind of, right? This is, Naomi Klein said, if we can come together as communities with respect to NAFTA, we can do this so quickly with respect to climate change. That goes as far as dumping, et cetera, as well, because climate change is just one part of a very large industry, of a very large system, yeah. So we would like to start with the premise of truth. So if Canada, the government website, what if we were to have on page number 1 where every single dollar is located? So we as a nation, we input our dollars. Where are all those dollars allocated? complicated, and we should be able to ask our MPs where they're going, and they should be able to answer to us. Yeah. Excuse me. So transparency and cooperation, largely first. That would mean the political will across all 4 parties. So no partisanship. This means that we have to make this a priority today. We did the same thing when it came to the ozone layer. So forget it. This is our number 1 priority. Focus. R&D should go into into provinces and territories that are heavily reliant on fossil fuels, so they could do the transition out of their industries. So maybe do a volunteer program in which, if you're working in the oil and gas industry, do you want to come do this program? We'll pay you just like you did. We're paid in oil and gas. What's happening, and then we can transition. Once you start that, the floodgates will happen. So a focus on conservation and an understanding of what the environment actually provides for us. From a money perspective, we would need 4 Earths to generate what the environment produced for us now. Emotionally and from a health perspective. Largely, people are getting cancer, people are dying early. So just more along that line. So make TPP, CETA secondary to our health from a legal standpoint. So getting rid of Bill C-38. So subsidized education for those, as said before, who are entering into educational programs in the renewable sector, and free interest-free loans for those who are entrepreneurs and developing that economy that way. So also, just the political system we need to really, as a people, like we see France going to the streets to protest their labor reforms, etc. We as Canadians, we are sometimes very complacent. So in this, we need to collectively come together. This is a great start. We need to be that much more vocal, because we are also one of the biggest outsources of pollution too. Mining, and we purchase everything from China, so we celebrate our wins, yet we export that out. So just understanding from that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so one of the first things that I think that we need to recognize is that the Liberal government has a majority right now, right? So they're able to do whatever they need to do over the next 4 years. The Parliament will allow them to do it because they have full control. So that's the first thing. So there's no excuses of being obstructed by a different party. They can enact anything that's needed, and it's needed today. On the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, the most important part of that law, that treaty or whatever it is, that needs to be ratified, is their right to say no. If they don't want something to be developed on their land, it cannot be developed on their land. Trudeau talks a lot about Indigenous reconciliation. That's an extremely important part of it. Some of the people in our group talked about the closing down of nuclear plants and how expensive it is to retrofit a nuclear plant for it to be clean, or for it to be next generation nuclear. So we don't need to be putting our money into that. Ending all of fossil fuel subsidies. Keeping all fossil fuels in the ground. No new infrastructure in fossil fuels. Like, you don't dig a grave and then teach yourself to climb out of it. You just don't dig it. James Hansen, the NASA scientist who in 1988 testified in front of Congress and said anthropogenic climate change was real. 30 years later, he's saying that cap and trade doesn't work. You need to be taxing these industries at the point of extraction. The other thing is public education and the media. The Liberal government has a lot more access to the media than any of the environmental groups we might be involved in, or our friends and families. And they have not been properly promoting these consultations.
Shame.
There shouldn't be 40, 50 people in this room. There should be thousands of people coming to this. the last thing, the thing that I want to close on, and I want everybody to look around the room at this. Look at the composition of this room. There's not one age group. Every single person at my table said that they're willing to risk arrest after October if the government doesn't listen to what we're asking for. Okay, these are not 20-year-olds. These are people who already have their career, their lives, and their families, and they want to go on the front line. Civil disobedience if the government doesn't listen to us. So I think that's the accountability.
Let's go to this table over here. You can get a little bit squishy between the tables.
Did you need this?
No. I probably do. Too late now.
Why don't we just have it near him in
Yeah.
case he wants to do something? We'll keep that as an option. Here, I'll hold it.
We had a very high-powered table. They're not gonna let me do this alone.
If you don't mind, can you just move it so people can
Yeah,
see the
yeah.
notes if we...
So honestly, when this is my third town hall meeting, and the third time I've stood up in front of people, and I feel like I'm in a really bad episode of Doctor Who. You got the evil brothers who control all the resources in the world and control all the governments and all the wealth, and they're stomping on the people, the indigenous people, taking over their land. And what can we do about it? What on earth can we do to fight these people? Unfortunately, this bad episode happens to be reality, and every time I talk to people, I think, is this what the world has come to now? Within 150 years, the human race could possibly be extinct, and this is reality. This is what we're facing. So, our table was talking about all sorts of stats and all sorts of things that the government can be doing. I want to sort of appeal to the government's sense of morality and say, can you do the right thing? Do you want your legacy to be one of helping us get out of this pit, get out of this morass, or will it be that you helped with our demise? Because in the next 4 years, that's what it amounts to. This is the crucial time. It has to happen now. The science is really clear. There's no equivocation. You can't develop the tar sands. You can't develop the oil and gas sector at all and meet our Paris commitments, which, by the way, are extremely lukewarm and need upgrading drastically. So I'm appealing to people's and the government's conscience. Even if your leaders say, believe otherwise, it's up to each person in the government to say, look, this is what the science says. We can't be bullshitting around here. We need to get rid of fossil fuels and get to a green economy starting right now. That's the only option that's available. And really, that's what all our talk boils down to.
Sorry, you had one more.
Oh, I've got like a zillion more.
Oh, okay, sorry. No, I was going to try it.
Okay, we'll mention David Hughes, who's a federal scientist who just came out with a report a couple of weeks ago, and basically went over every scenario possible for expanding the oil and gas sector and meeting our Paris commitments, and his conclusion was it cannot be done, period. Cannot, under any circumstances, be done. So this pipeline stuff, no. Expanding the gas plant in BC, no. If the government is on the level here, that's what they're going to come up with. That's what they're going to be saying. We talked about jobs. So the whole myth that we're a trading nation, which Mr. Trudeau has said, and that we are dependent on the tar sands for our livelihood. No, everybody knows this is baloney. 40,000 oil workers have been laid off. The LEAP manifesto has clear mandate to retrain oil workers, pay them while they retrain, and get them into the green sector as quickly as possible. So in terms of the economic benefits of the tar sands, they're basically nil. And we all know that. This is just common sense here. So I'm really, again, appealing to everyone here to tell your neighbors, because we don't have enough people for a critical mass where we can influence the government. We have a lot of dedicated people here, and at the other meetings I was at, I'm very heartened by the knowledge in this room and the knowledge that I saw when Ms. McKenna presented. No one is fooled. No one is fooled at all by what the government is saying right now. So I'm hoping, again, I'm hoping through these ministerial meetings that the government really comes to the proper conclusion here.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next table behind. And what I'll do is I'll actually, just so that you can know, like, I'll just go to the table behind and then we'll go to here. Just so you can kind of see what the plan is. And we'll end with this table here. You're closest.
Thank you. We also had a very knowledgeable group. We started off our own experiences or knowledge of the droughts and wildfires and knowing it's happening right here in Toronto as well with extreme weather happening. Moving out, we talked about cooperation between the federal, provincial, and municipal governments on transit and highlighted the need for federal funding for all of these transit plans we hear about but are not funded. We talked about changing the tax structure, and we actually spent